Hey everyone, it's John, and today what we're going to be doing is another video on, you guessed it, network automation. So in my previous video, what I went through was the Scrapli library. Now Scrapli is my favourite library for network automation. It can do so much and it does it all so well. Now previously we focused on Scrapli's ability to perform asynchronous network automation. This is a super powerful feature of Scrapli and it really is pretty unique to the library, at least in the space of network automation. But here is the thing, Scrapli can also plug in to the very popular Nornir framework. Now Nornir does not use asynchronous connections, instead what it uses is threading. This is how we get our concurrency. Now of course there are differences between using threads versus using async IO, but those differences aren't really the subject of this video. What I want to do in this video here is to explore a feature of Scrapli called Scrapli CFG. This is a pretty new feature within Scrapli, and just for a little bit of variation, just to highlight Scrapli's flexibility, instead of using Scrapli natively, I'm going to plug it into the Nornir framework here. But just be aware, you can use Scrapli CFG asynchronously just like you saw in the previous video. Now what I will say is that Nornir Scrapli doesn't actually have Scrapli CFG in the main branch just yet. I believe it's still a few weeks away from being released. That means that in this video, I'm going to be pulling from the develop branch. Now just be aware that if you're watching this in the future, that very likely you won't have to go through this step of installing from the develop branch. This is just because it's not yet released, at least not officially. But just keep in mind, in future, by just installing Nornir Scrapli, you should be able to get Scrapli CFG baked right in. Now, another thing which I want to highlight is that this video really will not be comprehensive. The best way to get all the information on what Scrapli CFG can do is to go to the Scrapli CFG documentation page, and I'll leave the link for that in the description. But once again, I'm just trying to give you a little flavour of the power of this library. So how about I shut up and we get to doing some automation. Okay, so let's first begin with our installation then, shall we? So like I say, the best place to go for all things Scrapli is to the documentation page. The documentation is really well written. So like I say, I'm not going to be doing the regular installation here. This is what you'll be able to do in maybe a few weeks' time. But for now, because it's not quite released yet, I'm going to be installing from the develop branch. So I'm actually going to copy this link here. So that's copied to my clipboard. What I'm going to do is create a virtual environment right now. Okay, so let me just create a directory, and I'll just call this random test, whatever. And let's cd into this directory, and we'll create a virtual environment. So we'll say python 3 mvenv, and we'll say .venv. Perfect, so what I'm going to say is cd into this directory, and I'll just activate this virtual environment by saying source bin activate. Perfect, and now what I'm going to say is python 3m, and I'll just paste in this link. There we go. So this should now pull from the develop branch, and within that we should be able to get the pre-released Scrapli CFG. Okay, so what we're also going to say is pip install, and we'll make sure that Nornir utils is installed. This should automatically be installed by Scrapli, but nevertheless, let's just check it's there. All good. And what we want to do is to get Nornir Jinja 2. So let's install this, hit enter. Perfect, so let me just go back here. What I'm going to do is just quickly copy some of my Nornir inventory files from another directory. So I'll go into my IPvZero directory, and I'll just copy the hosts file, the groups file, the defaults, and the config file, just to save me writing them out again. Okay, so let's go into random test. Now we have these files here. So what we're going to be doing in this video here is focusing on a feature of Scrapli CFG that does configuration replacement. Now just be aware that with configuration replacements on Cisco iOS, it can be a little bit unstable if you don't give the device enough time. This is not a Scrapli problem. This is something that's going to happen the same thing if you're using Napalm. It doesn't really matter. It's just by doing configuration replacements on Cisco iOS legacy devices. So just to prevent any kind of issues, what I'm going to do is artificially crank up the timer here. So just in case if you're getting some type of errors, it might be worthwhile to change the transport timer. So I've just got it really high at 20 seconds. That is more than enough just for the purposes of this demo. And here's my config.yaml file, pretty straightforward. And my host.yaml, you'll notice that I've just actually got one device within my inventory. I've commented out the other three. The reason for that is you'll see pretty shortly. Basically, I'm going to be templatizing the configuration for my device. And just in the interest of brevity, so that I don't have to templatize all of the interfaces and all of the IP addresses for all devices, I'm just going to be focusing on one device. But suffice to say, you can certainly build this out to have as many devices as you want. So this is just a little time saver for me for the interest of keeping this video short. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is go to my device. Now what I want to do is to set up the archive feature on this device. So what I'm going to say here is archive, if I can spell this correctly. And I'm going to say path flash archive, and I'll just say write memory. Okay, so this should be the device prepped. So what I'm going to do here is to put some basic configurations on this device, and then I'm going to change the configuration into a Ginger template where I can use variable substitution. Again, I'm not going to be templatizing the entire configuration, that's going to take far too long. So I'll put a basic configuration of OSPF on, we'll templatize this part of the configuration. And I'll say router ID, all the ones, and I'll put a network statement of maybe 10.0.0.0, and we'll put this in area 0, I'll arrow up, I'll do .4, and maybe make this in area 1, whatever. Okay, so very, very basic configuration. What I'm going to do right now is just say show run. Okay, so if I just full screen this, and I scroll on down, what I'm going to do here is copy the configuration starting from the version here, okay? So I'm going to grab this all the way down to the very bottom, down to end, and I'm just going to copy this. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is make a directory called templates, and I'll cd into this directory, and I'll create a file called config.j2. Now what I'm going to do here is go into this file here. So I'll go into my templates directory, and I'll go into config.j2. Now I'm just going to paste this in here. Now we're going to templatize this configuration to do a configuration replace. Now to simplify this, what I'm going to do here is first remove the banner. Now you can put a banner in a configuration replacement, but you're going to have to use special characters because of this little character here, this C character. Basically it can make the configuration fail. If you follow my CBT Nuggets course, I'll show you how to handle this, but for now, for speed, I'm just going to delete this. Okay, so this will do for now. We'll begin templatizing it very, very shortly. So let's quickly write a runbook first. So I'll go back a directory and I'll create a runbook called run1. And let's go into this file right here. Okay, so what I'm going to say here is from nor-near, I'm going to import init nor-near. I'm going to say from nor-near Scrapli, I'll go into tasks. And what I'm going to do is import CFG load config. I'll import CFG diff config and CFG commit config. What I'm also going to say is from nor-near utils, go into plugins, go into functions, and I'll import print results. Next, we'll go into from nor-near utils, go into plugins. This time we'll go to tasks, then into data, and we'll import the load YAML task. This is going to allow us to load in our variable files. And to build our configuration, what I'm going to say is from nor-near Ginger2, go into plugins, tasks, and then I'm going to import template file. Perfect, so what I'm going to do is initialize my NR object, so I'll say init nor-near, and tell nor-near where my config file is, and that is config.yaml. And what I'm going to do is create a custom task here, and I'll just call this whatever I want. I'll just say load vars, whatever, and I'll pass in the argument task. Now what I'm going to do here is to create a variable to store my result here, so I'll say var result is equal to, and I'll take my task object, use the run method, and the task is going to be equal to the load YAML task. Now this is going to take an argument file, and what I'm going to do here is use an F string. Now, even though I'm only using one device, I could hardcode this, but realistically, I would templatize the entire configuration, and this would be running against multiple devices, so I'll just do it the correct way. So I'll say look into the host vars directory. This is the directory I'm going to create, and I'll just say task.host to parse out the device name of each device within my inventory. So this means it will look in r1.yaml, and then r2.yaml, r3.yaml, for every device you have in your inventory. Now, like I say, I only have R1 on my device, so it will only look in r1.yaml. Now what I want to do is to save the output of this task to a per host dictionary key. So the way I can do this is say task.host, and you can just choose any name you want for this dictionary key. My convention is to use the word facts, but there's nothing special about this word. You really could use the word pizza if you wanted. In fact, for fun, let's just leave it at pizza then, shall we? So what I want to do is to bind to this dictionary key the output of my var result variable, but not just that. I need to take the result attribute of that. This is how I get the actual result of that task. Now what I'm going to do is to call another task. So I'll just call this configure stuff, and I'll pass in task. So let's create this task here called configure stuff. And again, it's going to take the argument task. Now what I'm going to do here is create a new variable called maybe, I don't know, config template. And I'll take my task object, use the run method, and the task this time is going to be equal to template file. This is going to take an argument called templates, if I can spell that correctly. Now the template name is going to be the name of the template we're using. This is going to be config.j2. So what I'll say here is config.j2, and I need to tell nor-near whereabouts it can find this config.j2 file. So the path is in look in the templates directory I just created. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is create a variable just called configuration, and that is going to be contingent upon my config template variable I just created there. But again, I need to take the result attribute of that to get the actual result of the task. So now effectively what I want to do is to pass this rendered configuration into Scrapli CFG. So I'll say task.run, and the task this time is going to be CFG load config, and the config I want to load is going to be this configuration I've just rendered here. So I'll say config is equal to configuration. And what I want to do is to have declarative configuration here. So what I'm going to do is do a full replacement. So I'll say replace and give it the Boolean value of true. Again, I'm going to say task.run, and I'm going to say task is equal to CFG diff config. This is going to tell me the difference between what I'm attempting to load in versus what's on the running configuration. So I want to compare it against the source of the running configuration. And lastly, for these configurations which I'm loading in, for them to actually have effect, I need to commit them. So I'll take my task object, use the run method, and the task this time is, you guessed it, CFG commit config. Again, where do I want to commit it to? I'm going to commit it to the running configuration. Perfect. So to actually execute all this, what I'm going to do here is create a variable to store my results, and I'll take my nr object, use the run method, and I'm going to tell Nornir to run the task load vars. And what I'll do is use my print result function to print out this variable results I've just created here. So let's save this. So like I say, Nornir is going to run load vars, which is going to execute this part of the code, and at the very end that's going to call this task here, which is in effect going to execute all this part of the code. Now like I say, we're going to be templatizing our configuration. We're going to be using this config.j2 file. We haven't actually templatized that yet. And we're also going to load in our variables that we're going to be using within this template. So let's create this host vars directory and create this r1.yaml file. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create a file, or rather a directory should I say, called host vars. And if I cd into host vars, I'm going to create one called r1.yaml. Again, typically I would create much more like R2, R3, R4, so on and so forth, but just because I don't want to templatize everything, I'm just using this one device. Okay, so let's go in and edit this file then. So I'll open this, I'll go into my host vars, and I'll go into r1.yaml. So this is a YAML file, so we'll have our 3 hyphens at the top here to denote that. And again, typically I would make this much more voluminous. I'd have way more data here, but I'm trying to keep it simple. So I'll just have my host name, and I'll have this as R1. And like I said, I put this OSPF configuration on, so I'll create an OSPF key, and I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll go in and create a router ID of, and I'll just change it to something different, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll create a networks key for the networks I want to advertise, and we'll do a little hyphen here because we're going to have a list of networks. So the first key I'll just call net. Again, you can choose any keys you like, and I'll just say 10.0.0.0, and that'll have a mask of 0.0.0.3, and this will be an area 0. Now for the next item in the list, again, I'll say net, and maybe I'll say 192.168.1.0, whatever, it doesn't really matter, I suppose. And we'll say the mask, this time we'll give it a /24 mask, and the area is going to be, let's just call this one area 1. Okay, it's super simple here. Now let me just split my screen so this is a little bit easier for you to see here. So let's just move this over a little bit, and let me go into my config j2. So like I say, I'm going to templatize my hostname and my OSPF configuration. Now the way I can substitute this using Jinja 2 is my double curly braces, and the way I can access this value is by saying host, this is a Nornir convention, and the next key is the dictionary key I bound that data to, so we can find this within our run1.py, so that is pizza. So I'm going to have to do that then, so it'll be host.pizza, and this is going to store all this variable data. Now we have access to everything here, so the next key is going to be, you guessed it, hostname. So host.pizza.hostname should render the value R1. Okay, so let's scroll on down, and we'll get this OSPF configuration. So router OSPF1, we'll just leave that hard-coded. The router ID, we're going to variabilize this, so we'll use our double curly braces, and we're going to say host.again pizza. This gives us access to all of this stuff here. The outermost key is OSPF, as you can see here, so let's use that. And to get the router ID, we use the red key right here. Okay, perfect. Now because we have multiple network statements, we're going to have to use a for loop. So the way we can use this logic within Jinja is a curly brace and a %sign. And what I'll say here is for, and I'll just create a variable name. Let me just say network, since that's what we're looping through. In host.pizza, and how do we get the networks? We go through OSPF and then the networks key. So we'll say OSPF networks. And what I'm going to do here is call in these values. So this value here can be changed. So I'll use my double curly braces for variable substitution. I'm looping through this network variable, which gives me access to each iteration. So I'll say network. And what I want to do is to call the next key which I'm looking for. So the key which I'm looking for here is net. It's going to give me 10001 upon first iteration, and then 192.168.1.0 upon the second iteration. So I'll say net. Now I want to change the wildcard mask. Again, I can get that with double curly braces. I'll use network, which I'm iterating through, and I'll use the mask key. Okay. Then I'm going to say the word area, and to get the actual area, once again, double curly brace, network. This time we're going to parse out the area key. Okay, perfect. Now I can just delete this hard-coded version here. And because we have opened a for loop within Jinja 2, we're going to have to close it manually. So we'll say %end for. Okay, so let's save this. And now let's try running our script then. Okay, so we'll cd back out of this, clear the screen, we'll say Python 3, run 1.py, hit enter. And bam, look at this, we actually get a contextual diff coming through from our CFG diff config task, and it shows us the things which have been added, i.e. the things which have been changed, and the things which have been removed. So within the running configuration, we had this banner. Within our template, that was not there, so that was removed. Same again here for our OSPF. We removed this, and we've now got this instead. So once again, if I happen to change something else, go back to my variables, and let's just say I happen to just remove this part here. So we've actually deleted that configuration. If we clear the screen, arrow up, hit enter. From the Scrapli diff config, we can see that the net result is Scrapli has removed this part of the configuration from the OSPF with this little minus sign here. You can see that. That means it's been removed. Now, just to show you one final feature which I happen to really like within Scrapli CFG is to be able to get a nice side-by-side diff. So let me just quickly show you how we can do this then. So within my file here, if I can get the right script, what I'm going to do is go to my debugger. So I'm going to import IPDB, and I'll say IPDB.setTrace to run the debugger immediately after this has ran. Okay, so I'm going to have to pip install IPDB as well. So I'll say Python 3m pip install IPDB, hit enter. Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to do is to rerun this script, and then what should happen is we should immediately fall into our debugger. So let's hit enter. So now we fall into our debugger. What I'm going to do is show my results variable, which I've saved my results to. So hit enter, and you can see that we have this aggregated result. This is a non-linear concept, and it's effectively a dictionary-like object, whereby each dictionary key corresponds to each device within the inventory. So I can say results and pick out the R1 key, which in effect happens to be the only device within my inventory right now. So if I hit enter, this now unwraps the aggregated result into a multi-result object. Now this is a list-like object, so I can go into position 0 here, and this shows me my load vars task. If I go to position 1, my load YAML, position 2, template file task, position 3, my Scrapli load config, and in position 4, I'm getting my CFG diff config. This is the one I want to check out. So what I'm going to do here is just dir this. So if I say dir, okay, now you can see here that we actually have this Scrapli response object. What I want to do is to access this. So what I'll do here is I'll just access this Scrapli underscore response. Okay, perfect. And again, I'll dir this. So arrow up, put it in brackets, and dir. And look at this. You can see that it does have this side-by-side diff attribute. This is what I want to access. So in effect, within my script, to get that side-by-side diff, I'm going to say this. Now, like I say, the aggregated object is going to take the host name as the first key. So just to simulate a more realistic example of me having multiple devices, I'm going to unwrap this via a for loop as opposed to just hard coding it. But effectively, this is the path I'm going to use to get this side-by-side diff. So let me show you this. So let me just comment out this here. Okay, so what I want to do is to parse out all the hosts within my inventory, even though there is only one. But again, just in case you happen to do this on multiple hosts, what I'll say is for host and nr, go into my inventory host, and then take the dot values. This will give me the values of all my hosts. So what I'm now going to do is print my results, but what I'm going to do is to pass in my host, which I'm looping through. So that would unwrap the aggregated object. Now the part of the multi-result object I want to take is position number 4. That's got my Scrapli diff, and then I'm going to take my Scrapli response object and then use the side-by-side diff attribute. Oh, and I'll just make sure I've got my square brackets there. Okay, so let me just close this one here, and I'll just delete this part here. So what I'm going to do is save this here, and just for demonstration, let me go and change one of my variables here. So I'll change the host name from R1 to IPvZero1. So let's save you, and try rerunning this script then, hit enter. And bam, look at this, we have a side-by-side diff of the actual configuration here. On the left is what the configuration used to be, on the right is what the configuration now is, so you can easily see what has changed, what is the result of your automation. So if we scroll on up, remember we changed the host name, we get this nice colorized diff here. So we can see on the left, the host name used to be R1, but now because we've used Scrapli CFG, and change the configuration, it is now IPvZero1. Super, super cool. So again, this is only a small piece of the pie when it comes to Scrapli CFG. The best place to go to explore this tool is to the documentation, and once again, I will leave the link for that in the description below. But for now, as always, keep labbing, keep practicing. This is John, signing off. Thanks very much, and I'll see you soon.